Hello, and welcome to Section 1, Introducing Yi2. In this section, we will set up the development environment for our application, install the Yi Basic Application template, learn how to navigate the directory structure of the template, and finally learn the basics of configuring our application. This is the first video of Section 1. It's called Creating a Development Environment. It explains the process of creating a virtual development server on our local PC using VirtualBox, Vagrant, and Puffit. In this video, we will download the software required to create our server, learn how to properly configure it, and finally boot up our server for the first time. In case you were wondering, we've chosen these particular tools because they're all free, they work well together, and are easy to use. Even if you prefer different virtualization software, we recommend you use these tools for the duration of this course because many of our examples are designed to work in this environment. The first step is to download VirtualBox, which will allow us to create a self-contained Linux server that can be easily started, suspended, and destroyed with just a few simple commands. For this course, we're going to install a CentOS guest machine on a host running OS X Yosemite. Open your browser and go to www.virtualbox.org. Click the Downloads link to download the appropriate version for your machine and run the installation binary. In VirtualBox, the virtual server is referred to as the guest, while the machine running VirtualBox is called the host. Next, we're going to download Vagrant, which makes it possible to configure our guest machine using text files. Go ahead and visit www.vagrantup.com. Click the Downloads link, and once again download your system-specific installer and run it once your download is complete. After Vagrant is installed, we'll use Puffit to generate the configuration files needed to create our development server. Go to puphpet.com and start off by telling Puffit that we're going to install our server locally. Tell Puffit that we're going to use VirtualBox as a provider, and then select your favorite Linux flavor. We'll use CentOS. We can leave most of these next options set to their defaults. But please note, our guest machine will be using the IP address 192.168.56.101. We'll also set up forwarding for MySQL on port 3306, which we'll need later when running automated tests. One thing that Vagrant helps us do is sync files between our host and guest machines, so we can edit files on our host machine using our favorite IDE, and the changes will instantly be reflected on our server. So let's go ahead and tell Puffit to sync our local packed code folder, which is located in our home directory, with the web root of our server. Now, click Packages and tell Puffit that you'd like to install Vim, which we'll use to edit some configuration files on the server. We'll also need to add PHP-XML so our unit tests will run properly. Next, click Firewall Rules and create a rule to allow traffic through port 3306 from MySQL. Moving on, we'll set up our web server. Check Install Apache. We will access our application using the domain monstermash.dev. We can also get rid of this server alias over here. Also, we need to tell Apache that it can locate our files in the web subdirectory of the monstermash directory. Now, we need to install our server-side scripting language, which is of course PHP. As long as we're using PHP 5.4 or higher, our server will be able to meet Yi2's minimum requirements. We also need to add the MB string and iMagicK extensions as Yi requires them. At this point, we have our operating system, web server, and server-side scripting language configured. The last piece of the puzzle is our database. Let's go ahead and use MySQL. We'll change our username to something more appropriate for this application. And while we're at it, let's rename our database. Finally, we'll grant our new user access to all databases. Now that we've got everything configured, all that's left to do is click Create Archive, and then click on the oversized download button in the middle of the page. Puffit unpacks its files to a very unmemorable folder name, so I suggest renaming it to something a bit easier to remember. You should note that we've also included a copy of the Puffet files in the course code samples if you'd like to make sure we're all using the same server configuration. Now, we're ready to start our server. Change to the directory that contains your Puffet configuration files, and simply type Vagrant up. Go grab a coffee, and in about 10 minutes you'll return to find your brand spanking new server ready to use. So far, we have learned how to create a virtual server on our development machine. This will come in handy as we install the Yi framework and begin to code our application. In the next video, we will learn how to install the Yi 2 basic application template, which is the starting point for most projects that use Yi 2 as a development framework.